In 2005, Mike Boucher and his fiancée Judy planned a trip to Hawaii. Approximately 20 NELL members took part in this visit to several of the Hawaiian islands, where we rented vans and traveled to various lighthouses, as well as other cultural sites and activities. Our trip begins on the island of Oahu, where we all meet and board the Norwegian Cruise Line's Pride of Aloha, docked in Honolulu Harbor. After getting settled in, we head out in vans to our first lighthouse, Diamond Head, located on the southeastern tip of Oahu on the slopes of the Diamond Head crater. This aerial view shows the lighthouse location down in the lower right, where the red dot is. This square 57-foot tower made of concrete was activated in 1918 and has a focal plane of 147 feet above the water. This is the second tower at this site and still uses the original 1899 third order Fresnel lens. The Keeper's House is the residence of the 14th Coast Guard District Commander, and the station is not open to the public. Here you see the group in front of the tower. Then we move down along to the side to get pictures. It's a beautiful area. From this area, looking down the shoreline, you can see a distant view of Makapu'u Point and a lighthouse sticking up out there. We'll visit that later. And also offshore, north of Makapu'u, is Rabbit Island. We traveled next to Barber's Point, approximately 28 miles to the west of Diamond Head in Kalailoa. Sailing past this point was tricky due to a shoal that extends 2 to 3 miles to the south and west, leaving only 6 to 10 feet of water. This point was named after Captain Henry Barber, whose brig Arthur was lost on the shoal in October of 1796, along with 6 of his 22-man crew. The original 1888 tower was 42 feet tall, and it was constructed of coral stone and mortar and topped with a red lantern room, exhibiting a 4th order Fresnel lens. The present 71-foot conical concrete tower was built in 1933 and has a focal plane of 85 feet. The stairs inside the tower are metal and they're counterclockwise on the way up. Here are some familiar faces, people climbing the tower. Starting in the back, on the left is Pat, and then Sharon and Liz, Tom, and then down in front is Darlene. The lantern was removed and the Fresnel lens was replaced with a 36-inch airway beacon in April of 1964 when the station was automated. In 1985, the airway beacon was replaced by a double-barrel rotating optic directional code beacon, DCB 224, which we see today. Here's another view from the top of the tower, looking to the west. And then we also have this faraway view looking at the tower. And then we get to another view of Ron Bandock, I believe, up at the top with his camera taking pictures. For our third lighthouse, we're going to travel back to downtown Honolulu. Honolulu is a modern city with a unique blend of cultures that serves as the state capital and a gateway to the Hawaiian Islands. The Aloha Tower was constructed in 1926 and is 12 stories tall. It was topped with a beacon that helped guide ships into Honolulu Harbor up until the late 1960s. Construction of taller hotels obstructed the Aloha Tower beacon, so the beacon was extinguished and a new beacon was installed on top of a 220-foot television tower. This was replaced in 1975 by a light atop a pole at the end of Pier 2. You'll see this light later on in the trip. The Aloha Tower is still a popular tourist destination due to the lookout balconies on the 11th floor. Just gorgeous, looking in all directions. And here's a view of Diamond Head from the balcony. Here's a happy group of NELL members enjoying lunch at one of the many shops in Honolulu. We later went to Paradise Cove for a traditional Hawaiian luau. We enjoyed a welcome Mai Tai and authentic Hawaiian fare, including fresh seafood, kalua pork, and we were entertained by Hawaiian musicians, hula dancers, and fire twirlers. It was loads of fun. Here's a view of Waikiki Beach, which is downtown. You can see the surfboarders in the next slide here, and they had a lot of fun riding all the waves. And everybody from, oh, I'd say 12 to 92 were on boards, having a blast. Then you'll see this fellow throwing a fish net right off the pier, and then he brings in some fish, which I'm sure he enjoyed for supper that night. Speaking of fish, here's an Eleuterus scriptus fish, which we saw as we were walking down the side of the road over a little bridge. And we went into the malls, and here you see a few parrots, and then Hillary was able to speak with a little cockatoo. He was friendly. And from our boat, we were able to see some views of Honolulu with rainbows. It was nice. A lot of rainbows there all the time because it rains, very short time, and then the sun comes out and you have rainbows. And here's the famous clock tower from our boat, and we spoke of that earlier. And we also mentioned that a light replaced it in 1975, and this is the light at the head of Pier 2. We're on the ship, and of course, if you've ever been on a cruise, you have to take drill with your life preservers on. Here we have some people from our group, and then a whole bunch of people with their life preservers on. And they also showed us one of the lifeboats that hang from the side. We became familiar with that. And if you've ever looked inside of one, this is what it looks like. I think it'd be pretty cramped in there, but it would save a lot of people. We had fun on the ship. As we were sailing, there were dance contests. Here I am on the dance floor having fun, up until the time when the fellow tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're all done." Our ship left Oahu and headed for our next island, Kauai. And our first lighthouse on Kauai was actually our fourth lighthouse, Nai Wili Wili. Here's a view of Nai Wili Wili from our ship as we pull into Kauai. And here's another view of it with its light on. You'll see an airport behind it in the distance. The planes fly very close to the lighthouse. And here's a tug approaching us to help us into the harbor. Another aid to navigation is seen on the end of the point. And our next lighthouse is Kuki Point. We'll see as we go into the harbor, and this is Kuki Point here. Just a pyramid type tower, small concrete tower. And here's the range lights, Nai Wili Wili range lights. Next, we travel to Kilauea Point National Wildlife Refuge. It's the northernmost point on the Hawaiian Islands. Here, the group is listening to a ranger tell us about the flora and fauna. And as we're there, we have a frigate bird fly over our heads. There it is. And we also see a wedge-tailed shearwater on land underneath the bushes. This is the location of our next lighthouse, Kilauea Point. It was very difficult to build this lighthouse as there were no roads, so materials had to be delivered by boat and hoisted up the 110-foot cliffs to the site. Here's our group walking up to the lighthouse. Lighthouse's 52-foot tower was completed, and its second-order bivalve Fresnel lens sent out its first beam on May 1st, 1913. In 1974, the lighthouse became part of the Coast Guard's Lighthouse Automation and Modernization Program, also known as LAMP. During the station's automation, complications arose with the mercury flotation system, and the mercury had to be removed, which crippled the revolving lens. Here's a picture of that beautiful lens. A modern rotating beacon was established on a 10-foot pole on the seaward side of the tower, and it was activated in 1976. The original tower, though inactive, retained its priceless clamshell lens and was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1979. Kilauea was renamed the Daniel Inouye Kilauea Lighthouse during the May 2013 centennial celebration. We then traveled to Nanini Point to visit Niwiliwili Lighthouse, which we passed when the boat arrived in Kauai. U.S. Coast Guardsman Jim Young is our host and describes the history of the lighthouse and the surrounding area. The station was established in 1904 with a 40-foot wooden tower. The current 72-foot concrete tower was completed in 1932 and topped with a 36-inch airways beacon. We experienced the closeness of the station to the Lihu Airport when a jet passes overhead very close. Here's another group photo of happy lighthouse lovers. And a couple other shots of Niwiliwili Lighthouse. And we see that the lonely lighthouse is prone to graffiti. This is Waimea Canyon, aka the Grand Canyon of the Pacific. It's 14 miles long, mile wide, and 3,600 feet deep. We spot a goat climbing on the rocks in the canyon below. Look closely. You see him? Look closely at the end of the arrow here. Ah, there's a close-up of him. Some gorgeous country in the canyon. And there's our group looking at one of the outlooks. We also see Waipu Falls, which drops over 800 feet. and there are volcanic formations. As we leave Waimea Canyon, we encounter some friendly fowl along the parking lot where we were. We then travel to the southernmost tip of Kauai to Makahuena Point Lighthouse. This lighthouse was established in 1922. Originally, there was a concrete tower up until 1983. That's when it was replaced by the current light atop a metal pole that holds diamond-shaped reflective panels. The tug gently nudges us out into the harbor, and as we leave Kauai, we again see Kuki Point, Niwili, and Kilauea lighthouses. Back on board, we see Tom Kenworthy and Ron Bandock enjoying ice cream, and MJ and Sharon Pagels with breakfast. One of our kitchen servers would entertain us with songs. Our next island is Hawaii, where we see our 8th light on the journey, Coconut Point. This current concrete pyramidal tower was erected in 1975 and topped with a green flashing light. We continue to Cape Kumakahi Lighthouse, the easternmost point of the Hawaiian Islands. The Lighthouse Board made its first request for a lighthouse at Cape Kumakahi in 1907 and again in 1908. Finally, the U.S. government purchased 58 acres on Cape Kumakahi from the Hawaiian Trust Company. And in 1928, a 32-foot wooden tower with an automatic acetylene gas lamp was erected. Eventually, an asphalt macadam road was built in 1932 to link the station to the nearest highway. The following year, 2 5-room dwellings, water tanks, and a reinforced concrete foundation for the new tower were completed. A square pyramidal skeletal tower was constructed of galvanized steel, and 2 36-inch airway beacons were placed at its top, roughly 125 feet above the ground. One of the Kilauea volcano eruptions produced a lava flow that came very close to Kumakahi, but it split just before the tower and flowed around it. Historically, Kilauea is the most active of the 5 volcanoes that together form the island of Hawaii. Located along the southeastern shore of the island, the volcano is between 210,000 and 280,000 years old and emerged above the sea level about 100,000 years ago. In 1916, a bill forming the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park was signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. Since then, the park has become a World Heritage Site and a major tourist destination, attracting roughly 2.6 million people annually. Kilauea volcano has been very active with eruptions from 1983 to 2018. This was by far one of the longest duration eruptions in the world, and as of January 2011, the eruption had produced 1 cubic mile of lava and resurfaced 48 square miles of land. Pele is the goddess of volcano and fire, and gifts, including flowers as seen here, are often left at the crater in her honor. Here's my Hawaiian princess, MJ, along with a native Hawaiian vendor. MJ liked the lei so much that I purchased it for her. Here are members of our group taking a tender from our ship into Hilo. And along the way, They're going to get a brief look at Paka'a Light and also another aid to navigation in Hilo Harbor. Our next lighthouse is near the northern tip of Hawaii. Kohala Point juts out into the Pacific Ocean. We are met by our Coast Guardsman, Joey Gomez, our tour guide for Kohala Point Lighthouse. Steep cliffs surround the point on either side, and reefs extend from the point for roughly 2 miles. After several ships wrecked off the point, the Hawaiian government constructed a wood frame 40-foot tower topped by an enclosed lamp room. A lens and reflector amplified the beam from the lamp room's bay window that could be seen for 10 miles. The light was activated in 1897, 1 year before Hawaii became a U.S. territory. There was need of a major light at Kohala Point, and after repeated requests, funds were finally allocated in 1933 for the new tower. Plans were nearly identical to those used for Naiwili Willie, built on Kauai the previous year. Called for an 86-foot conical structure built of reinforced concrete. A 105-foot step spiral staircase led to the top of the tower, where a trap door had to be slid back to access the beacon. A revolving 36-inch airway beacon atop the tower flashed red and green every 6 seconds. The station was automated in 1951. The cliffs near the tower continued to erode with time, and by 2007, it was within 15 feet of collapsing into the ocean. A replacement beacon was erected on top of a pole in November of 2009, and the tower you see here was demolished in December of that year. This design is from the U.S. Coast Guard Aid to Navigation Team Honolulu shirt. Joey Gomez, our guide, gave us a shirt to auction off to raise funds. Along the way, we come across a statue of King Kamehameha. He was the first founder and first ruler of the Kingdom of Hawaii in July 1782 until May of 1819. Our next destination is Mahukona Lighthouse. This is to the west and south of Kohala and was home to large sugar plantations in the 19th century. Large wagons of sugar and molasses were hauled to the coastline by steers and eventually loaded onto steamers for transport to market. A minor tower built of rock was the base for a lamp to guide ships into the area. In 1915, the current 22-foot concrete pyramidal tower was built and topped by a flashing acetylene light. Cheaper labor elsewhere in the world brought the production of sugar on Hawaii to a halt. Today, the lighthouse is part of Mahukona Beach Park, a popular destination for camping and swimming. South of Mahukona is Kauaiahi Lighthouse. By 1845, the port of Kauaiahi had become an important stop for procuring fresh food and beef by the whaling ships. From 1859 until 1915, various small structures were built to support a beacon, but eventually all failed. The present 36-foot beacon was erected in 1915 and sends out a white flashing light every 6 seconds. Taking the tenders back and forth from our ship to shore, you get used to it. And you also get used to being frisked. Here's Anthony Savino being frisked before we can get back on the tender to go back to our boat. And here's a good shot of Ron Drummer and Nina Wolfson on the tender getting ready to go back to the ship. And you're always used to the Coast Guard always going around the ship and checking things. The last tower we see on the island of Hawaii is located north of Hilo, and it's a typical pyramidal concrete tower. Here's a glimpse of it. Pauka'a Point Lighthouse. Here we arrive at the island of Maui, where we see a tug pushing a barge loaded with shipping containers. And we pass the U.S. Coast Guard buoy tender, Kukui, at dock. The mountains hide their heads in the clouds, and soon we're on the Hana Highway, aka Road to Hana, a 25-mile-per-hour, 50-something mile road loaded with hairpin turns and blind spots. Along the way, we see surfers. This is a great pastime in Hawaii. You see a lot of people surfing out there. Here are some cattle grazing on a hill above the ocean. You never know what you're going to see along Hana Highway. Got some great views looking off one of the hills. And here's a stream we cross on a little bridge, and it's got some outdated gear that's still there, probably to raise a door to let water through. Here's some nice greeny leaves from the trees. We pass a lot of water, little waterfalls and ponds and rivers. And eventually you pass vendors. They're just on the side of the road, little kiosks all by themselves, selling jewelry or whatever, flowers. Another little pond with a couple of waterfalls. And then we come to Hanakolani Cemetery. This is a very old private cemetery located in Wainapanapa State Park. The rugged shores of the park were formed by lava flows many years ago and consist of sea stacks, blowholes, and lush vegetation and a black sand beach. The black sand was the result of the pounding surf breaking up the lava rocks over many, many years. That's the black sand beach down there below us. And here are some rock formations with waves crashing below. Mary Jane just had to put her feet in the water, so she took off her sandals and waded toward the water. She was having a good time and turned to ask me if I wanted to come in. Little did she know that wave was coming up behind her, and there was no way I was going to go in. Hit the road again and pass another little bridge with some gears for management of the water underneath. And then we have little waterfalls, and there's cliffs right next to the road which has water dripping on them, almost like a little waterfall there. And off in the distance we see little villages. We're on our way to our next lighthouse. McGregor Point Lighthouse is our next stop on our trip. It was named after Captain Daniel McGregor, who in 1870 was involved with the delivery of supplies between the windward landings of inter-island vessels. One night in turbulent seas, rain, and low visibility, he found his ship in shallow waters and ordered the anchor dropped. In the morning, he discovered an excellent cove that was protected by a projecting point of land. Today, the 1915 22-foot concrete pyramidal tower flashes its green beacon 72 feet above sea level. About 14 miles to the northwest from McGregor Point is Lahaina Lighthouse. Lahaina served as the capital of the Kingdom of Hawaii from 1820 till 1845. Several small wooden lighthouse structures over the years displayed a light that was hard to distinguish. The present structure was dedicated by the Coast Guard in 1916. This light station was the first in the Hawaiian Islands and predates any lighthouse on the U.S. Pacific coast. We took in a few sights around the lighthouse and the town, including the ship, and in the center there was a huge tree with a craft fair going on. There were people that were selling everything, carvings, artwork, and we came across this fragrant plumeria, which is a wonderful flower that you find in Hawaii. It's just gorgeous. It smells wonderful. And this Hilo Hattie is a store you'll find a lot of different places in Hawaii. There's everything from clothing to cards and gifts. We travel about 17 miles from Lahaina to Nakalele Lighthouse. As we get there, we notice cairn, piles of stone in the field as we work our way out to the lighthouse. We can see a distant view of the lighthouse, the pole, the light on top, which is typical of some of Hawaii's lighthouses. In 1908, a temporary light was displayed atop a 40-foot wooden mast. By 1910, a keeper's dwelling had been constructed on the point. A fixed white light emanated from a box-like platform on its roof. The light was automated in 1922, and the characteristic was changed to flashing white. Today, the light atop a steel pole also supports reflecting aids to navigation. Here we are back on the road around Maui, and we see a steer in the road, so we kind of slow down, and we see a whole bunch of steer off the side of the road, grazing and enjoying the day. This is the 646-foot high Kahaloa Head, located east of the village of Kahakaloa. Kahakaloa Village is an isolated, picturesque community with 2 churches and a few small businesses to include Lorraine's Banana Bread, Banana Cream Pie, Julia's Banana Bread, and Karen Lay's Gallery. Here's a beautiful view from up on the hill, looking out toward the ocean. And here's a horse grazing. As we come around the island, in the far distance, we can see our ship. I don't know if you can spot it there, it's way in the distance, just about in the center of the picture. Here's a closer view of it. And another one. Pride of Aloha. From Maui, we set sail for Oahu and Honolulu, where our trip began. You've seen Honolulu before. These are a few pictures of our ship coming into port. You probably recognize a little bit of it. Green light guiding us in. Honolulu certainly is a beautiful city. And here also the Coast Guard circles our boat, as in all the harbors that we were in, just to make sure we're protected. And here is the Aloha Tower, which we described as a lighthouse early on. And then we pay another visit to Diamond Head, this time down on the beach, and walked along the beach, got a little different view of it. Here's a better view with the Fresnel lens showing in it. A little better than from the front row. And just past Diamond Head Lighthouse is, I'm not sure, I think this is private property, not a public place, but wouldn't you love to live there? Right on the water. Next, we're going to travel approximately 13 miles east of Diamond Head to Makapu'u Point. John R. Slattery, a West Point graduate who had been sent to Hawaii in 1904 to oversee improvement of harbors and aids to navigation, considered both Makapu'u Point and Rabbit Island, located just to the north, as sites for a lighthouse, but selected Makapu'u Point even though the light there would be so high that it might be obscured during thick weather. On June 10, 1906, Congress appropriated $60,000 for construction of the lighthouse. Any doubt that the light was truly necessary was eliminated when 2 months later, a $2.5 million passenger liner Manchuria ran aground off Makapu'u Point. Slattery was charged with drawing up plans for Makapu'u Lighthouse in August of 1906. Slattery designed a short tower that would keep the light as low as possible, but still high enough that wind couldn't blow pebbles into its lantern room glass. Work on the station began during the summer of 1907, and the 35-foot concrete tower was ready to receive its lantern room and lens by October 1908. But the lantern room had not yet arrived. What size of lens to use in the tower had been debated. Plans called for a third-order lens, then a second-order lens, and finally a first-order hyperradiant lens. 1,188 glass prisms and brass framework were raised up the 400-foot face of the cliffs with block and tackle from the deck of a ship moored near the point and assembled in the lantern room. The station was automated in 1974. Here, happy lighthouse lovers Linda Speece, Anthony Savino, Pat and Ron Bandock, Hilary Seary, and Ron Foster pose near Makapu'u Point. Next, we stop at the Plumeria Forest. I believe this one's in Cocoa Crater, but Plumeria is beautiful. Mary Jane's enjoying their fragrance. They come in many, many different colors. Here are a few. Notice the shapes change a little bit, different varieties. Next, we visit Pearl Harbor. We're greeted by Sterling Cale, a Pearl Harbor survivor, and we see a battleship USS Missouri. The USS Arizona Memorial at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii, marks the resting place of 1,102 of the 1,177 sailors and Marines killed on the USS Arizona during the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, and commemorates the events of that day. The Pearl Harbor attack led to the United States' involvement in World War II. Inside the memorial, we see the names of all those who sacrificed. And below the water, we see remnants of the hull and of the Arizona. The memorial was built in 1962 and is visited by more than 2 million people annually. Here we see some artifacts that were brought up from below that belong to Admiral Kidd. He was the captain of the USS Arizona. And here is the ship's bell that was brought up from the wreckage. Next, we travel a little over 30 miles to the north and west of Pearl Harbor to get to Kaina Point Lighthouse. This lighthouse is the westernmost tip of Oahu and is a celebrated legendary site for the Hawaiian people. In 1919, the Bureau of Lighthouses decided to place an unmanned acetylene light on Kaina Point. Due to its remoteness, the light frequently fell victim to vandalism. Between 1980 and 1985, the light was extinguished 11 times as senseless people shot at the lens or stole the beacon's batteries. In 1990, the concrete tower literally fell victim to erosion and was replaced by a light atop a metal pole. In the 1980s, the Navy requested that the range of the Kaina Point light be increased to assist submarines. Rather than installing more powerful light on the beach, the old Kaina Point light was renamed Kaina Point Passing Light, and a navigational light was activated atop a building at the Kaina Point tracking station on the bluffs behind the point. The new light has a focal plane of 931 feet and a range of 25 miles. On the way back to our hotel, we take a couple of pictures of Honolulu and Diamond Head Crater in the distance. Our trip is soon coming to an end, and tomorrow we have to head home. We have to get a little bit of sunshine, sun going down with palm trees. Something to look back at when we get home, remember Hawaii. And the next morning we wake up and on the way to the airport we catch a rainbow. That's nice. And it was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I was able to share it with you folks. And goodbye.